Hi, visit our website at zebracode.io, a free coding curriculum for high school students. We are on Lesson 8, and Lesson 8 covers user-defined functions, and we'll focus on homework problem number 5. Write a function which has 4 input parameters. The first parameter represents the number of quarters, the second, the number of dimes, the third, the number of nickels, and the fourth, the number of pennies. The function returns the total value of all coins. So, of course, the first thing we're going to do is define a function. So let's go ahead and open up our integrated development environment, and we're developing on our PC as opposed to our browser-based system. You should be able to switch comfortably between the two. Let's get started in our PC environment. Def, that defines our function, and our function name, we're going to call it count coins, and it's going to have 4 input parameters. In this case, I'm going to name the 4 input parameters Q, D, N, and P, representing quarters, dimes, nickels, and pennies, respectively. So the return value is going to be a variable that I'll call value, and I'll initialize it to 0, and we're going to make it a float value since we'll be dealing with dollars and cents. So the value simply is 25 times Q, because each quarter is worth 25 cents, 10 times D, because each dime is worth 10 cents. We have 5 times N, because a nickel is worth 5 cents, and then we can add on the number of pennies represented by P. And then we can return simply value. So it's very simple. Just with a few lines of code, we can write this function and encapsulate it within a function, or excuse me, write this algorithm and encapsulate it within a function. So now in our main program, notice we're indented all the way to the left, or we're no longer indented. I've created a new variable. I'm going to call it v, is assign the value, and we're going to now use the function name, and we're going to pass it the 4 parameters. And these are going to represent the number of quarters, dimes, nickels, and pennies accordingly. And then we're going to print out the value of all coins is, and that's going to be represented, that's going to be a string, and then we can concatenate it with the string because value is going to be returning a float value, so we have to convert it to string. And now let's go ahead and run this code. So I'm going to save it. I'm going to save it in homework 8, and I'm going to call this, let's call this coins, or let's call it problem 5 because that's what actually it is in the homework number problem 5. So let's go ahead and open up our command prompt and let's execute the code. Type Python with the name of the script, and it says the value of all coins is 123. So this is doing what we expected, but again, we need to now convert this to cents, and we can also make it a little bit nicer formatting, making the output. So let's go ahead and just clean up the code a little bit, but it seems to be doing what we expected. We take 3 times quarters, that's 75, add in 4 dimes, and if we add it all together, we will get $1.23. So we know that we're on the right track here. Next, let's clean up our code a little bit. Now notice we're returning a float value, and instead of doing that, let's actually turn it into a string. So first of all, let's also divide it by 100 so that it's going to be the appropriate value, because instead of being 123, it's really $1.23. So we're going to create a new variable called value str. That's going to be the value converted to a string, and I'm going to assign it the value of string and then value divided by 100. So now we've taken this value, which in the prior case was 123, and we've converted it to a string, and we're going to add the $sign and then concatenate that with the string value. So now instead of returning value, we can write this function to return value str, value string, and it's going to be a string. So now we can go ahead, and when we print out the results, we don't no longer have to convert it to a string because it's already a string, so we can just say v here. So v is assign count coins, and that returns a string, and then we print out the value, and we concatenate it with a little bit of message here. So let's go ahead and run this again, and now we get the value of all coins is $1.23. It has a $sign in front, and it's a little bit more accurate. Now we can even do a little bit more with this. Let's actually try to make it where the user can input different values. We're not hard coding 3 quarters, 4 dimes, 1 nickel, and 3 pennies. So in order to do that, we need to create 4 input statements. And so let's go ahead and do that. We're going to use the same variables Q, D, N, and P, but we could use different variables because remember, these now in our main program, these are global variables, and everything within the function, the Q, the D, and the N, and the P are local variables inside the function. But in this case, we can use the same names here. even though they're really representing different values, but it allows us to understand and follow the code in this case. So we're going to have Q is going to be assigned the value of input into the number of quarters. D is going to be assigned the value of input into the number of dimes. N is going to be assigned the value of enter the number of nickels. And then we can do the same thing with P. P is going to be assigned the value of input enter the number of pennies. So now we're going to have four variables, Q, D, N, and P within our main program, and those are all going to be strings because anything coming in with the input statement is a string value. So now we can take this and we want to pass integers because our count coin values, actually the Q, the D, and the N and the P as parameters going into the function are actually integers, and so we need to convert those to integers in our main program because in the main program they're strings. So once we convert it, the program will work exactly as before. We should get a return value which will be a string, and we can concatenate it with a little bit of message. Let's go ahead and run this again. So let's go with 2 quarters, so that's 50 cents, and a dime, so that's 60 cents. Let's add in the nickel, 65 cents. And then let's add in 3 pennies, so that gives us 68 cents. And when we run the program, the value of all coins is, and it gives us appropriately 68 cents. So we've done some quick work with functions. We've understood the idea of parameters with functions and a return value with functions. Then we understand the idea of calling it from a main program and passing those variables as parameters, and then getting the return value when we call the function in the main program. This is zebracode.io. We're learning about user-defined functions in Lesson 8.